I think that needs very serious and urgent consideration in the context that Chris has already set out, which is if we continue on the path that we're on right now, in all likelihood, electricity prices for a typical customer are going to be 20% higher in 4 or 5 years' time than they are now. And that's even if wholesale prices halve.
I think that, as Rachel alluded to, what we have in front of us is a system where even if the wholesale price were to halve, as she indicated, the bills will rise.
If I look at the non-commodity costs, policy costs, network costs, then certainly some of the numbers, some of the modelling that we have suggests that you could get to a position by 2030 where if the wholesale price was zero, bills would still be the same as they are today because of the increase in those non-commodity costs.
But the non-commodity costs are adding about £300 of pressure onto a typical bill. We've got to do something radical to address that. Actually, the country as a whole at the moment is paying over £20 billion a year on their electricity bills for policy costs. Now, the projections are that that is going to increase. That is one of the £100 that is possibly going to be added to bills on the current trajectory, electricity bills, over the next 4 years. I think it's time we got this burden under control.
We have a business in France and EDF, of course, we serve customers. We can compare the cost to serve in France, cost to serve in the UK. Per point of delivery, the cost to serve in the UK is about £100 per annum. In France, it's 45 euros, which is half, more or less, actually less than half. And this is not to do with the wholesale price or the gas marginal cost or etc. It is driven by the fact that we have a very complex regulation that has stratificated over the years.
I accept that, I'm sure that's true, but the evidence, the overwhelming evidence that we've received says it's to do with the marginal price. So what would you do about that, and do you agree that it's a problem?
I think, I don't agree with the evidence, to be honest with you.
But the reality is that it is added to incrementally, piece by piece. Department over here puts in a subsidy for new nuclear, department over there puts in a subsidy for CCS. There is no budgetary control of this, and yet it all ends up on household bills or in contributing to making our electricity some of the most expensive in the industrialised world.
No, personally, I think policymakers have to make a decision as to where they believe those costs are best borne, and whether they believe, to the point that was made earlier, that the incentives being offered to build infrastructure are necessary. That's a choice that policymakers have to make.
Stop there.
There are things that I think we can do there. We can move some of those non-commodity costs, particularly the legacy policy costs, feed-in tariff, climate change levy, renewable obligations, off the electricity bill. That would help bring bills down. Well, that's for policymakers to decide.
We're asking you. You're sitting in front of us.
You can.
And part of the solution could be taking gas out of the market. I don't think it's a silver bullet. I think we need a government that is looking at a range of radical options and looking to move along with the regulator and other parts of the system much more quickly to address the path that we're on before it's too late.